I knew we were heading for a train wreck the moment that clipboard hit the bottom of the waste basket with a thud loud enough to silence the entire warehouse floor. Blake, 26, cocky and radiating that Silicon Valley podcast energy, held up my laminated checklist like it was a dirty napkin. "This," he declared with the kind of smirk that makes your jaw clench, "is something straight out of a 1960s typing pool." The crew laughed nervously, not because it was funny, but because when the guy who signs your performance reviews mocks the veteran with 22 years of zero accidents and perfect safety records, you either fake a chuckle or find your toolbox cleaned out by morning. He tossed it into that bin like he was curing world hunger with QR codes and buzzwords. Then he clapped his hands like a kindergarten teacher on espresso and announced, "Let's get agile, people." I swear the man thought an app could change brake fluid and calibrate hydraulics. I didn't say a word. I just stared at that trash can, my clipboard wedged between a half-eaten Caesar salad and an empty Red Bull, and something shifted deep in my chest. I've survived bad managers before. Outlasted 6 of them, actually. But this one was special. This one came with holographic PowerPoints and a girlfriend who live-streamed our loading dock on Instagram like it was Coachella. Real quick, before we dive deeper into this beautiful disaster, if you're one of the 98% listening and not subscribed, hit that button and drop us a like. It fuels the team that brings these stories to life, kind of like coffee but digital and less likely to stain your shirt. Alright, back to the chaos. Blake rolled out his innovation strategy that same afternoon. No more physical checklists. No more daily equipment walkthroughs. Instead, we got an app that crashed on half the phones and sent notifications to a Teams channel that nobody had alerts enabled for. He spent 30 minutes explaining how cloud-integrated workflow optimization would eliminate human error. Meanwhile, Jimmy from maintenance had to ask him 3 times how to find the damn calendar feature. By Wednesday, the hydraulic lift hadn't been inspected in 5 days. The lubrication schedule for the conveyor system got skipped twice. The air compressor sounded like it was chain-smoking Marlboros behind the building. I flagged it verbally, then in writing. Blake said, "Relax, Vera. This isn't 1985. We've got predictive analytics now." Then he posted a selfie in the break room with a ring light and a venti frappuccino, captioned #leadership. He stripped me of floor supervisor authority. Said my reporting methodology was legacy. Told HR I was struggling with digital transformation. All because I suggested radical I know that we maybe keep tabs on the machines that literally generate $4 million in revenue per day. So I adapted. I started documenting every skipped inspection, every ignored alert, every system anomaly. Took photographs. I timestamped everything. I backed it all up to my personal cloud storage in a folder labeled, "When Hell Freezes Over." Because there's a difference between innovation and sabotage dressed in skinny chinos. And sooner or later, this warehouse was going to teach him the difference. The first system Blake killed was our morning safety walk. What we used to call the coffee and listen tour. You'd walk the floor, feel the hum, the vibration, catch that occasional rattle that shouldn't be there. Some things you don't learn from a dashboard. You learn them from the way concrete vibrates when a bearing's going bad, or how steam sounds different when a gasket's about to blow. But according to Blake, scheduled inspections were redundant overhead for modern equipment. He announced it like he was bringing fire to cavemen. "If it ain't broke," he said, "why waste time checking it?" This from a guy who once tried to restart the forklift by holding down the horn button. He also axed my shift reports, said, and I quote, "Nobody reads PDFs anymore, Vera. It's 2025. Instead, he launched a Teams thread called #DailyVibes where people were supposed to just drop thoughts, like we were all journaling our feelings instead of managing industrial equipment that could crush your skull if you blinked wrong. For a few days, I wondered if maybe I was the problem. Maybe I was too rigid, too stuck in my clipboard ways. Then the warning signs started rolling in, and they didn't come gently. First, it was Lucy misloading pallets because Blake told her to skip the weight verification step. "Just scan the barcode and keep moving," he'd said. Then it was Carlos forgetting to drain the moisture from the compressor tank, a step that had been automatic for 8 years until Blake declared it micromanagement. Then the proximity sensor on conveyor line 2 started glitching. One morning I noticed someone had shut off the ventilation fan completely. Blake said it was drawing excessive power from the grid. I told him it was preventing heat buildup in the motor housing. He told me, "We've got smart thermostats now, Vera. Chill." I didn't chill. I started documenting everything. Not with company tools, they were already Blake contaminated. I used my personal tablet. Every vibration I heard, every gauge reading that looked off, every smell that seemed wrong. I photographed it all. I wrote detailed notes. I even sketched diagrams when words weren't enough. My folder was titled Operation Paperclip. Wasn't meant to be funny. It was survival. The crew started noticing too. Not immediately but gradually. Instructions became contradictory. Blake would say one thing at 9 a.m. and something completely different at 2 p.m. He assigned 2 techs to update the same software simultaneously, and when it crashed the diagnostic system, he blamed user error and muttered about people fat-fingering it. People started whispering. Not rebellion, just concern. You'd hear things like, "Did we check that hydraulic line yesterday?" Or, "Is the backup generator still disconnected?" I kept my expression neutral and said nothing, because when you raise your hand too many times under a manager like Blake, you become the problem, not the solution. HR called me in for a coaching conversation, after he reported that I was resistant to process modernization. I signed their form, didn't argue, just nodded and smiled. Then I went home, cracked open a Diet Dr. Pepper, and finished annotating the photos I'd taken of stress fractures near the chemical storage tanks. Dated, time-stamped, and cross-referenced with the last time Blake had cancelled an inspection. He thought I was fading into the background. He thought I was harmless. He thought my checklist was just paper. He had no idea I was building something stronger in the shadows. The first real red flag wasn't a scream, it was a whisper. Not the good kind of quiet hum that tells you the lines are running smooth. This was a high-pitched, intermittent whine, like a smoke detector with a dying battery trying to yodel opera. I traced it to one of the main hydraulic lines near Station 7, right where the mounting brackets always stress when the internal pressure starts fluctuating. In the old days, I would have marked it down, flagged maintenance, and had Tony tighten the fittings within an hour. But now, that line wasn't even on Blake's digital checklist. It didn't exist in his brave new workflow world. I snapped 4 photos. One of the pressure gauge showing irregular spikes, one of the bracket mount starting to vibrate loose, one of the floor beneath it beginning to show stress patterns, and one wide shot for context. I logged them all. Time, 7:42. Date, Thursday. File name, Hydraulic Unearthen Rattles 31. I pinged Tony in maintenance with a casual, "Hey, could you take a quick look at Station 7 when you get a chance?" On Teams. Radio silence. At 10:15, the packaging machine on line 3 jammed hard. New kid, sweet guy named Derek, forgot to reset the tension calibration after a roll change. A step that used to be part of our daily walkthrough, the one Blake had called obsessive micromanagement. I went straight to Blake's office. Except Blake wasn't in his office. He was out on the loading dock giving a facility tour to his girlfriend, Brittany, who apparently ran some lifestyle blog and wanted to do a behind-the-scenes of American manufacturing video. She was filming herself walking between equipment in high heels and a crop top while Blake explained how he was revolutionizing analog workflows for the digital age. I stood there, holding my tablet. Yes, I'd printed backup copies for my own sanity, and waited for a break in their performance. When it came, I said we had a packaging jam and the hydraulic line at Station 7 was showing stress indicators. "It needs a shutdown inspection." Blake didn't even look at me. Just kept smiling for the camera and said, "Vera, please. We've already streamlined the bottlenecks. We're optimizing now, remember?" Brittany giggled and said, "She's adorable. Like a plant mom but for machines." I should have lost it right there. Should have grabbed that phone and thrown it in the nearest dumpster. But I didn't. Instead, I walked back to my workstation and documented both incidents. Photos, timestamps, cross-referenced with maintenance schedules that no longer existed. I created a new folder on my tablet labeled Evidence, Food Never. Over the next few days, the warehouse became a graveyard of ignored warnings. The lubrication schedule for the main conveyor got skipped 3 times. Bearings started grinding like they were chewing gravel. The emergency cutoff for line 4 flashed red for 12 seconds before auto-resetting. Nobody knew why. A temperature alarm triggered on the solvent storage tank. Nobody responded. I kept gently nudging the team. Hey, did anyone check that bearing noise on conveyor 2? Anyone follow up on that pressure spike warning? My tone was always professional, always helpful, and always met with the same shoulder shrugs, and Blake said it's handled. Then came the icing on this disaster cake. Char called me in again. Same 20-something rep, same novelty coffee mug, same rehearsed corporate empathy. Blake's concerned, she said, consulting her notes. He says you're struggling to adapt, that you may be undermining team cohesion with legacy process fixation. He nodded. I signed their form. Then I walked out and added the HR visit to my documentation. Entry number 63. Gaslighting deployed successfully. I wasn't resisting change. I was recording the collapse. It was a Tuesday morning, one of those humid summer ones where the air inside the warehouse felt thick enough to swim through. I was walking past control panel 5 when I heard it. Tick tick tick, pause, tick tick tick. A rhythm I hadn't heard in years and never wanted to hear again. It's the kind of sound that doesn't show up on any app. No alert, no red notification on a screen. But if you've worked industrial equipment long enough, you recognize it like a heartbeat going irregular. Machinery trying to speak Morse code for, "We're about to eat someone alive." The sound was coming from the relay bank connected to our main hydraulic pump system. 3 relays trying to synchronize and failing. I crouched down, ear almost touching the panel, and counted the misfires. This wasn't random glitching. This was a coordination failure that, left unchecked, could cascade into a full system lockup or worse, a catastrophic pressure release. I stood up slowly, wiped sweat from my forehead, and walked back to my desk. I didn't message Blake on Teams. I didn't drop a vibe in his daily chat thread. I drafted a formal incident report. Subject line: Urgent. Preventative shutdown required. Panel 5 critical anomalies. I copied Blake, facilities management, safety compliance, and even looped in the regional maintenance supervisor who still owed me a favor from that conveyor disaster back in 18. I wrote, observed irregular relay synchronization patterns in hydraulic pump control system. Recommend immediate 20-minute diagnostic shutdown. Failure to isolate could result in pressure system malfunction or safety incident. Photos and audio logs attached. Sent time: 8:17 a.m. At 8:31 a.m., Blake replied, "Thanks for the heads up, Vera, but we're not shutting down production because someone's nervous about normal operating sounds. We're in the middle of a high-volume shipping cycle. Let's stay focused on throughput." Nobody else responded. I stared at that reply for a full 2 minutes, read it 3 times, then opened my desk drawer and pulled out my portable printer. I printed every single page. The report, Blake's dismissive response, the photos, the timestamp from my voice recording app where I'd captured the irregular clicking pattern. Each page slid out of that printer like evidence in a murder trial. I stapled them together, labeled the packet, and filed it in a red folder titled, When Happens. Then I did the hardest thing of all. Nothing. I didn't storm into Blake's office. I didn't call an emergency meeting or stage some dramatic confrontation. I just walked back to panel 5, listened to it tick its mechanical death song for 10 more seconds, then grabbed my lunch and sat outside on the loading dock, right where Brittany had once filmed herself doing yoga poses next to a propane storage unit. My turkey sandwich tasted like cardboard. Back inside, I watched the production line keep humming. Forklifts weaving their patterns, conveyor belts carrying their loads, machines doing their best impression of normal operation. But underneath it all, I could feel it, that off-rhythm beat, like a skipped heartbeat waiting to become cardiac arrest. I told myself, one more day, one more log entry, one more warning for the pile. 'Cause some systems don't scream before they fail. They whisper. And when nobody listens to the whispers, the whole facility learns what silence really costs. The countdown had started. Blake just didn't know it yet. Monday, 11:43 a.m. It started with the kind of screech that makes your soul flinch, a wet, metal-on-metal shriek that cut through the warehouse hum like a chainsaw through silence. Then the lights above line 3 began strobing red. Alarms wailed like the building itself had finally had enough. The main conveyor seized. Not a gentle hiccup or momentary jam. This was a full mechanical cardiac arrest. The drive rollers locked solid. The motor overcompensated, fighting against immovable weight. Product backed up behind the jam like cars hitting black ice. And somewhere down the chain, the automated tension system tried to correct the impossible and failed spectacularly. One alarm became 5. 5 became a symphony of disaster. And then the hydraulic system, that 3,000-gallon beast of steel and pressure that I'd been warning about for weeks, hit critical mass. Emergency cutoffs triggered. The entire warehouse floor went dead silent, like someone had unplugged the heartbeat of American manufacturing. For about 3 seconds it was just the sound of machinery dying. Then came the shouting, the scrambling, the maintenance crew cursing while fumbling for safety equipment with hands that weren't quite steady. Our floor supervisor, the one Blake had promoted for being innovation-minded, ran in circles screaming, "Just reboot it. Reboot everything." Like the warehouse was a frozen laptop instead of 10 tons of industrial equipment having a nervous breakdown. I didn't move. I stood exactly where I'd been when it started, right beside line 3, my backup clipboard in hand, the same one they called obsolete, the same one that still had grease stains from 2 decades of perfect shifts. The red folder was in my bag. All the logs, all the photos, all the ignored warnings, all the printed Teams messages where Blake had said, "We're not shutting down because someone's nervous." From across the warehouse, someone yelled, "Kill the power! Kill everything!" But honey, it was already dead. HR came clicking out in high heels and panic, trying to remember where the fire exits were. An intern slipped on a puddle of hydraulic fluid and took out a parts cart like it was a bowling pin. Someone on the admin team was crying because she couldn't figure out how to mute the facility-wide PA system that kept blaring evacuation warnings. Then came the suits. First the safety inspector. Then the insurance rep, and finally, the plant manager's voice crackling over the speakers like God himself had gotten a very angry phone call from corporate headquarters. "What the hell happened down there?" Nobody answered. Blake was nowhere to be seen. My guess is he was hiding in the parking lot, refreshing LinkedIn and hoping someone would invent a time machine app. I felt strangely calm, like standing in the eye of a hurricane I'd watched forming for weeks. One of the maintenance techs brushed past me, eyes wide with panic. "Vera, do you know what blew?" He nodded. Relay synchronization failed. System overload wasn't caught by monitoring. Hydraulic pressure tried to compensate. Backup relief valve was never re-enabled after last month's optimization. Whole system choked on its own malfunction. He blinked hard. "You sound like you saw this coming." "I documented it 17 days ago," I said quietly. He looked at my clipboard, then at the chaos surrounding us, then back at me. "You told him, didn't you?" "I told everyone." As emergency crews flooded the warehouse floor with clipboards of their own, taking readings and barking orders, I didn't feel anger or vindication or some dramatic urge to scream, "I told you so," from the rafters. Felt stillness, like a machine that had been running too hot for too long, finally allowed to power down properly. Let the system crash. Let the alarms scream. I'd already prepared for this moment, because unlike Blake's system, mine was built to survive disaster. And the reckoning was just getting started. He appeared like a thundercloud in a $1,000 suit. No warning, no corporate announcement, no carefully worded email from communications. One moment the warehouse was buzzing with post-disaster cleanup, and the next, there he was, the CEO. Not a regional director, not some VP of operations, but the actual CEO. The man whose signature was on our paychecks, who hadn't set foot on a production floor in over 4 years. He walked through the main entrance like death had personally invited him. Navy suit, no tie, sleeves rolled up to his elbows. Looked like he hadn't slept since the emergency call came in. His eyes swept across the wreckage. Safety foam still hardening around the hydraulic manifold, 3 forklifts sitting idle with their warning lights flashing, electrical cables hanging like severed arteries. The plant manager trailed behind him like a man walking to his own execution. Nobody dared breathe loud enough to be noticed. Blake materialized from somewhere, probably the bathroom where he'd been stress vomiting, looking rumpled, red-faced. His company lanyard twisted like a noose. You could practically smell the desperation mixed with Axe body spray. The CEO didn't acknowledge anyone initially. Just stopped in the center of the warehouse floor and said, without turning around, "Blake, walk me through what safety protocols were active this morning." Blake swallowed hard, stepped forward clutching his tablet like a holy relic. Well sir, we've been implementing a digital workflow system, Teams integrated monitoring, and this dashboard here was supposed to track all safety checkpoints, but we had some synchronization issues today and..." He trailed off mid-sentence. The CEO hadn't moved, hadn't nodded, hadn't given him any indication he was listening. Instead he started walking. Slow, deliberate steps that echoed off the concrete floor. Everyone watched him make his way past the damaged equipment, past the emergency stations, past Blake's abandoned innovation station with its dusty monitors. He stopped at a maintenance cart near the break room. The same cart that had been sitting there since the disaster started, the one nobody had bothered to move. He reached into its lower compartment and pulled out something that made the entire warehouse hold its breath. My clipboard. The original one. The duct-taped, grease-stained, corner-frayed veteran that Blake had thrown away 6 weeks ago like it was contaminated trash. Someone, probably Tony from maintenance, had rescued it and kept it safe. The CEO held it up like evidence in a murder trial. Opened it to the last completed checklist page. My handwriting still visible in blue ink. The silence was so complete you could hear the emergency lighting buzzing overhead. He flipped through page after page. That familiar whisper of paper worn soft by years of daily use. Then he turned back toward Blake, his voice cutting through the air like a blade. This checklist ran our production floor for 8,760 consecutive days. That's 24 years. 0 unplanned shutdowns, 0 pressure failures, 0 OSHA violations. Blake opened his mouth like a fish gasping for water. The CEO raised the clipboard slightly. "Explain to me why it was in the trash." I was modernizing the process. It wasn't integrated with our digital systems. I thought we needed to evolve. Did it work? Silence. Did it work? Blake's voice came out as barely a whisper. "Yes, sir." The CEO turned toward me for the first time, his eyes finding mine across the warehouse floor. "You kept copies, didn't you, Vera?" I nodded once. Didn't need to say anything else. He handed me the clipboard. It felt warm in my hands, like it had been waiting for this moment as long as I had. "Finish documenting this incident," he said to me. Then, turning to Blake. "My office. Now." No threats, no shouting, just gravity itself shifting direction. The warehouse floor had found its new center of power. He found me in the small conference room about 2 hours after the chaos settled. By then, the emergency response teams had cleared out, the insurance adjusters had finished their preliminary assessment, and Blake, last I'd seen him, was sitting in HR looking like someone who just realized he wasn't the protagonist of this story anymore. The CEO stepped into the room and simply said, "Vera, we need to talk." We walked to his temporary command center, a borrowed office between accounting and legal, the kind with fluorescent lighting and forgotten filing cabinets. He closed the door and leaned against the desk like he was carrying the weight of the entire facility on his shoulders. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. "I've seen the documentation," he said quietly. "All of it." I kept my expression neutral. He continued. "The photos, the printed Teams messages, the incident reports, even your audio recordings. IT found your folder when they were doing the post-incident analysis. When a disaster happens, they said you predicted this shutdown down to the specific failure points. I stayed silent. You didn't grandstand, he observed. You didn't throw tantrums or stage walkouts. You documented. You did your job, you did his job, and you waited. Still nothing from me. He reached into a folder and pulled out a copy of my incident report from 3 weeks prior, the one Blake had dismissed. He laid it on the desk next to the printed screenshot of Blake's response. We're not shutting down because someone's nervous. You kept this place functional under someone else's negligence, he said, looking directly at me. That takes more professionalism than I see in most boardrooms. Something loosened in my chest then. Not relief, not vindication, something deeper, like a foundation finally settling after months of stress cracks. I didn't smile or cry, just nodded once. He folded his arms. I want you reporting directly to me moving forward. That caught me off guard. I'm sorry. You heard me. I don't trust this facility to operate unless someone who understands how it actually works has oversight authority. I want you managing every process audit, every safety protocol, every operational decision. Full access, direct reporting line, no intermediaries. I didn't answer immediately. My hands still smelled like hydraulic fluid and metal shavings. I could taste the burnt plastic from the failed relay system lingering in the air. And here he was, offering me keys to the entire operation. What about Blake? Asked finally. He sighed. Can't terminate him immediately. Wrongful dismissal lawsuits and all that. But he's out of operational authority. No team, no decisions. He'll observe and learn. Think he will. A slight smile crossed his face. If he's smart. Which I wouldn't bet your retirement fund on. The silence stretched between us. I'm not flashy, I said. I don't need flashy, he replied. I need functional. I looked around the cramped office. Mismatched furniture, a wall clock that ticked like it wanted to escape, filing cabinets that probably hadn't been opened since 2019. I want my own workspace, I said. With windows overlooking the floor. He actually laughed. You'll get an office with glass walls, whatever equipment you need, and yes, he grinned, your own industrial-grade label printer. I exhaled slowly. The kind of quiet that comes after a double shift when you finally sit down and unlace your steel-toed boots. I'll do it. He extended his hand. I didn't shake it, just nodded. We both understood. This wasn't a promotion. It was a course correction. 3 months later, my office overlooks the entire production floor. Glass walls, perfect sightlines to every conveyor, every pressure gauge, every piece of equipment that hums when happy and clicks when ignored. From my desk I can see everything, and more importantly, everyone can see me. On the wall behind my desk hangs a simple plaque. The Vera Protocol. Systems that actually work. And mounted in a glass case below it. My original clipboard. Duct tape, grease stains, corner wear and all. Blake still works here. Every morning at 8 a.m. sharp. He sits in the chair across from my desk with a notebook. Paper, not digital. And documents every safety check, every maintenance protocol, every procedural step he once called secretarial busywork. He writes down everything. Never speaks unless asked a direct question. And me. I don't gloat. Don't strut. Don't say, I told you so. But every time I catch him scribbling down the same steps he once mocked, I allow myself the smallest smile. Quiet professional but satisfying as hell. Because quiet competence beats loud ignorance every single time. And if anyone ever forgets that lesson, they can just look up at the wall. My name's up there in steel and glass, right where it belongs. Thanks for sticking around, you magnificent rebels. Hit that subscribe button, or this old-school professional might just have to document another epic corporate meltdown.